Welcome to College Compass by experts at scholarship.org. For the past 42 years, the staff at the George Snow Scholarship Fund and scholarship.org have dedicated themselves to empowering young people and ensuring they have access to the resources they need to succeed in their educational journeys. In each episode of College Compass, we'll sit down with experts to provide practical advice that will help students overcome challenges, thrive, and maximize their college experience. My name is Tim Snow. I'm president of the George Snow Scholarship Fund and scholarship.org, and I'm going to be your host for today's episode. Did you know that the average college student graduates with over $30,000 in student debt? And that's why we feel like today's topic is such a really important one to our listeners. And it's the first in a two-part series that we're calling College Financial Aid 101, Minimizing Student Debt. So in our time with you today, we're going to cover the basics on the different types of college financial aid and how to receive this aid. Joining me for today's show are Leslie Cornwell, who is our Vice President of Scholar Services at the George Snow Scholarship Fund. Leslie has over 12 years experience in the scholarship world and specifically working with our scholars to help them navigate the college experience. And joining Leslie and I is Austin Havass. Austin is our Scholar Services Coordinator here at the George Snow Scholarship Fund. Austin's a little bit newer to our organization, but he brings some real-world experience on the subject of financial aid and student debt. Leslie and Austin, I appreciate you guys joining us, taking the time to be with us today to share your experience with our listeners. Leslie, I'm going to kind of open the show, I guess, with asking you a question. If you could explain to our listeners why financial aid is so important to students that are going into college.
Absolutely, and thank you for having Austin and I. I feel like this topic is so hugely important to high school seniors, to their parents, to be honest, even for students who are younger, who know that they want to attend some post-secondary program, because it's all new to you, especially if you are the first child who is experiencing this and maybe your parents were first generation, and so they didn't go through the world of financial aid. And to be honest, it's changed dramatically. So even if they did, the ball game is different now. And it's a scary, confusing world. It's very daunting, the thought of, what does that mean by financial aid? What are you talking about? It almost seems like there's too much information, so I don't even want to start. And I also feel like most high school seniors, when you're entering your senior year, you're thinking of applying to the schools. What schools are the best ones for me to apply to? The last thing you're thinking about is, what schools can I afford, or what's going to be my financial aid package? And the problem with that is when you put it off and you think about it way down the road, maybe when schools accept you, is that you may be losing out on really valuable opportunities. And financial aid is the pathway for you. It is vitally important because it may mean the difference between you having a student debt-free life or being encumbered with student debt that follows you forever. It is the kind of thing that it affects your future financial decisions. Can you afford to buy a house? Can you afford to buy a car? Can you afford to have kids? Things that a 17, 18-year-old isn't really concerned about right now. But these are the things that happen when you don't plan. And so I think that this podcast is so important because this is nationwide, worldwide, that all students are going to have the same issues. Can I afford to go where I want to go? So the purpose of today is to give you those basic terms so you know what to be. It's not hitting you for the first time. Because we deal with this with our scholars and our scholarship fund every year, students who have issues with financial aid, and we educate them, and there are still issues because, keep in mind, it's not only high school seniors that have this issue. It's once you're in college, you continue to have the need for financial aid. So it's a different set of educational goals. But because we have this issue, we created a financial aid and debt guide. And Tim is going to go into more of that later. But it is vitally important that you educate yourself and that you learn so that you are putting yourself in the best position possible.
Yeah, I agree, Leslie. You touched on so many important points, and I have seen real life examples of students who get out of college, who are saddled with really, I use that $30,000 example. But in the example that I'm thinking about, the debt was far north of that. Mm-hmm. And it really impacted this individual to the point that they couldn't live where they wanted to live in the community that they wanted to live because they couldn't afford it solely because they had that student debt payment that they were responsible for after they graduated.
Absolutely.
So you're right. And it is such an important topic, and that's why we're here.
Right.
And that's why we're going to ask Austin now if he wouldn't mind telling our listeners, kind of going through the different types of financial aid, college financial aid, and explaining, what they mean. So he's going to give us some of that. We're going to ask you, Austin, to give us some of that terminology and what does it mean to students and how can they use this information to minimize that student debt that we're talking about.
Absolutely. So one of the first things that we have to think about is scholarships and grants. These are types of aids that do not have to be repaid at all. These are financial contributions towards your education, whether they are a scholarship that you apply for or a grant that is given to you. But let's break that down in a bigger detail. So a grant is a financial contribution towards your education. Usually these grants are need-based, which means that if you are determined to have a financial need in order to go to school, then you would be evaluated for your eligibility to receive a specific grant. I know Leslie will talk about the FAFSA a little later and how that plays out on the federal level, but there are actually some institutional and statewide grants that are determined whether based on your financial income, financial condition, or various other socioeconomic factors, as well as meritorious grants, which are awarded simply if you are a top performer or you have done well academically within your schooling. Additionally, scholarships is the second part of that do not need to be repaid equation. Scholarships are typically something that an applicant applies for, or in the case has earned as a result of their hard work inside school. Scholarships are also determined whether they are a merit or a need-based scholarship. But there is something important to address when it comes to the aspect of scholarships, and that is that a lot of students, and myself included, felt at a time when it was time to apply for scholarships that they were singled out of the equation and that the tool or the opportunity to receive scholarships, apply for scholarships, is one that was out of the equation. It's super important, especially as me sitting here being able to give this information here today, to talk about that a little bit. The feeling of exclusion when it comes to applying for scholarships is very real, especially for those who are listening who are on the cusp of seeing all these scholarship applications. You're hearing, apply for this scholarship, apply for that scholarship. Your guidance counselor is sending you scholarships, and you're kind of feeling, I don't know, I don't feel like I'm good enough. It is super important, and I'll get to why in a minute, why it's so important to put those feelings aside and to really apply for scholarships, because grants are one thing, but scholarships are another thing. Scholarships are something that you can apply for regardless of where you are at on the economic spectrum, but it will only happen if you apply. So one thing I'd like to tie in here is to talk about a little bit about George Snow. George Snow is one of those scholarships. Applying for the George Snow Scholarship is one of those scholarship opportunities in which we look at the holistic factor of an applicant. We don't specifically look at how one does on their GPA or how one does on their test scores. We look at the strength and vitality of the full picture. It's important for applicants to apply to any and all scholarships, but when you're applying for those scholarships, to present yourself fully. You want to make sure that when you're applying for scholarships, you are presenting the best image of yourself, that you're taking your time and treating your application like it is your dream school application. But on that note, there is another form of financial aid that is not so desirable.
Well, and let's touch on that in a second, Austin. But I think your point of, applying for as many scholarships as you can, and not being intimidated by that process is a really important one. And I say that because it's funny when we talk about and we interview some of our scholarship recipients, and it almost seems that the common comments that they make are, "I never thought I would get that scholarship," and I think a lot of our scholars really don't. And I'm not sure exactly why that is, but, as Leslie said, it's kind of an intimidating process. The whole thing is new to people, and people don't realize that, they underestimate really the power that they have to get these scholarships. And so I hope that people listening to us, students that are listening to us, will put that aside and realize that the chances of them getting some of these scholarships is really, really good. And especially if they're doing well, they know what they want to do, they're helping themselves and others. It's a high probability thing. And so I hope that our that'll be a takeaway from some of our scholars. Now, you talked a little bit about I think what we're going to talk about is loans, and and why those should be really kind of considered a last resort. And Austin, I'll ask you to kind of explain that to our listeners.
Sure. So these are some things. This is not new to many high school seniors that are sitting here listening right now, whether it's guidance counselors, parents, guardians, advisors. You're hearing this term, loans as a last resort, and it's not. It is so much of a true statement. The concept of a student loan is an aspect that is a form of available financial aid that is presented to you from the outset, but with the condition that you do have to pay it back. And while there has been talk about ways in which you can get out of it, a lot of that talk is cheap. And the majority of it, or all of it, you are responsible for at the end of the road. So there are different types of loans available for college students. That includes a federal loan, which is comprised of two categories. You have a direct loan, which is a subsidized loan, and subsidized means that the interest starts accruing after you graduate from a program. There is also an unsubsidized loan, and while these are not offered in your first semester or maybe your first year of schooling, it gets offered almost immediately thereafter. And unsubsidized loans are loans that start accruing interest immediately. When students are presented with a financial aid package, there will always be that aspect of having a loan, little stipulation there where it's accessible and available to them. And they see it and they're like, okay, well, there's not a lot of information here. It says I'm qualified for a direct loan and an unsubsidized loan. I might as well just consider it. But there's a great reason to take pause here, because while one separates interest from accruing when they're in the program, the other one, if you sign up for it, when the date that you sign up for it, interest starts accruing daily on that loan. And the personal element that I wanted to tie in was that I am one of the 40 plus million Americans who have student loan debt. And student loan debt is something that I can definitely relate to not being fully educated on when I decided to take those loans when I was in college. Did I need it for the time that I needed it? Sure. But could I have gotten loans and could I have gotten scholarship opportunities and applied myself? Absolutely. Loans are always available and they're readily available for you to pick. But for those who are sitting here listening, it's important to understand that these loans will come back to bite you. And they will be there waiting for you when you graduate. And what you think is a small loan when you took it, and then that you took another small loan, you took another small loan, and people are seeing these loans just start increasing and increasing and increasing. They think they take a little bit here and a little bit there and they'll be good. But all those loans start getting those interests, and then you're starting to wonder with the cost of life and the cost of living, now you have to factor in, okay, what do I have to remove from my available spending, or do I even have money to contribute towards my bills? Am I going to just let my loans skyrocket in interest to no end because I can't afford them? These are all decisions that are super, super important to consider before taking out those loans.
Yeah, Austin, you really touch on some really, I think, some very important information here. And, I think to me, the colleges and universities make it too easy to accept those loans and to be saddled with that debt. When we're reviewing the applications and doing our own financial need analysis, and when our listeners are going to get their financial aid package from the school, they're probably going to see these loans on that financial aid package. And they have the ability to, I think, accept those loans right then and there. Absolutely. So it's like, yeah, I'll take that loan versus investing the time beforehand, applying for scholarships like the George Snow scholarships, and those many, many scholarships that are around all around the country. And yes, it takes more effort, but you save yourself in the long run a lot of angst, if you will, to have to repay these debts. And again, I don't even think the loan should be a part of the financial aid package, because to me, that's not financial aid. Like you say, you have to pay that stuff back. And I really do think the colleges and universities make it far too easy for the students to accept that. So thank you for touching on that. One other thing that we haven't really talked about, and for our listeners, the George Snow Scholarship Fund, we're located in South Florida. So what I want Austin to touch on a little bit, in Florida, we have something called the Bright Futures Program. And that's a state-run program that pays either full tuition or a portion of our scholars' tuition based on different criteria. And even though we have that in Florida, I know that there are other programs like that around the country. So, Austin, can you talk a little bit about that and what that means to our listeners that are not necessarily in the state of Florida, but might have a program like that?
So absolutely. And those are touching on the points of being awarded for your hard work. It is super important for scholarship hopefuls, regardless of wherever they're at, to really research across the nation, research the opportunities that the state funds for you for your education. To touch on Bright Futures, that is something that can contribute to the full cost of your tuition at a Florida State school, or a Florida State college or university. Whereas you might be in a state like Colorado, which has their own version of that system, or New York, which has their own version of that system. And those are examples of those merit-based scholarships that, for all the listeners out there, if you did well in school and you followed the requirements of the scholarship, that's something that's available for you. You just got to research it and say, hey, go to your guidance counselor. Hey, did I qualify for this scholarship? What else do I have to do right now before I graduate to make sure that this scholarship is available to me? For those that are listening, there's also state programs that do it inside the college years. And it's so important for applicants across scholarship applicants, current high school students, current college students, to really start to research those options to see what options are available to them. Because you might be in a position where just because of the merit of your hard work and the way you presented yourself inside school could be at a great advantage to mitigate the amount of costs of borrowing that you may do from a student loan, because you have a meritorious scholarship like Bright Futures that comes and helps in that picture.
Yeah, that's good information. I'll add a little bit to that. I think it's important in these particular types of programs to be really proactive with that. And I would encourage young people and their parents to look into these programs like really early, in maybe even in the ninth grade, because a lot of them are based on, some of the criteria is based on GPAs. They're based on community service hours. There's a whole lot of different things. And you don't want to find yourself in your senior year because you weren't really necessarily paying attention to your GPA or some of those other criteria lacking and trying to make, play catch up to be eligible for these programs. Because they do. Florida Bright Futures will pay 100% of your tuition if you have satisfied some of that criteria, and some of it's extensive. And so you really have to plan ahead for that. And it's important for families and the students to be aware of that, so that they can take advantage of it, because it's free money and it's a lot of money. So Austin, you've given us a lot of information about the different types of college financial aid. What would you say would be maybe your top three takeaways or things that you want to communicate that are really important to communicate to our listeners?
Absolutely. So the first one, without a doubt, you need to apply to any and all scholarships. You need to really rest aside the aspect that you may not qualify for a specific scholarship because you feel that you are not good enough, worthy enough, or that they would even consider you. So many scholarship applicants leave that on the clearest no you'll get is when you do not apply. So that is first and foremost. You need to apply to any and all scholarships that are available to you. Put aside any notion that you don't belong. You belong. You've already made it this far in your journey. Take that extra step and showcase all that you present yourself to being, because you deserve to be you deserve a seat at the table. The second one is to research all financial decisions before making them. You receive your information from your college or university. Research that cost. You want to make sure that you can understand with your family, hey, is this a good fit? Is this a good fit? Or am I going to have to be saddled with student loan debt? The third one is understand that loans will be something that you will have to pay back. There is no magic cheat code to getting out of it. They will be there. You will have to pay them back. There is no workaround around it. Anything that might sell you otherwise is a cheap slate, and don't even consider it. A loan is something you need to pay back.
Well, all good stuff, Austin. I appreciate you sharing that with our listeners. Really important information. Leslie, I know that a huge part of getting a lot of this financial aid and being eligible for it is completing something called the FAFSA. Can you kind of explain to our listeners, what that is and why that is so important to everything that we've covered, really everything that we've covered so far?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, none of that matters. None of that aid is in your picture at all if you don't start with a FAFSA application. And FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It's a little bit difficult to do the first time you're doing it. People tend to put that off because there's information they don't readily have. It's troublesome. It's not something that you're going to be able to complete in a short period of time. However, the FAFSA is your gateway to a debt-free education, period. Without doing a FAFSA, you're going to be paying something, because a lot of these programs, you may be fortunate that you get your tuition covered one way or the other. And I think that's a huge misconception that students and parents have, that thinking, well, my tuition's covered or a portion of my tuition is covered, so it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to have any costs. And that's false. I mean, that's just part of your costs. There's so many costs that you wouldn't know because you haven't gone. If you're not living at home, you're going to have the cost of where you're living. How are you eating? Can you afford to come back and forth? So you want to, as I said earlier, you want to put yourself in the absolute best position, and it starts with a FAFSA. So this application is going to determine your eligibility for all aid. Federal aid, state aid, the school is going to take your results when you submit this application and determine if they want to give you aid. So that's what institution aid is school aid. So the key to that is doing it as soon as possible. The application opened technically on December 1st. Usually it opens on October 1st of every year. The last 2 years have been a little bit of years of turmoil and change. Hopefully the following year they will be back on the October 1st date. But it's up to you to do your homework. I mean, it's a real easy thing to find to go to the website. The website is fafsa.gov. That's where you're going to find the application. It's free. If you are on a website that is trying to charge you to submit a FAFSA application, get off of that right away. It's a free application. You're going to fill it out, but let me even back up a little bit, because the first thing you have to do is you have to apply for an FSA ID. You cannot move forward in this application without having this ID. You're going to have one. Your parents are going to have them. And once you apply for it, it takes probably 3 to 5 days for you to be authenticated. During that time, while you're waiting and you can't move forward in the application, take advantage of that time to get everything together that you're going to need for the application. So you're going to have your social security number or your alien registration number. If you have a driver's license, you're going to have that. You're going to have your parents' tax records. Again, this is not something maybe that they keep handy. They maybe need to get it from somebody. So you've got this time to gather all your records. If they have investments, you're going to have records of those. This application is very detailed, and it's also something that I want to stress that you need to do sooner rather than later. And the main reason why is that not only will this application tell you whether or not you qualify for federal aid, but if you are going to be eligible for any aid from your school, that's on a first-come, first-served basis. And we have had just heartbreaking stories of scholars of ours who had really nice financial aid packages at their school. The following year, they're involved in school, they're busy, they're not paying attention, they don't fill out the FAFSA till way later in the year, and lo and behold, they find out that their aid package has been reduced significantly. Well, this is horrible because, I mean, you can appeal, but I mean, if it's due because you didn't do the application, now you've lost that money. So when you submit the FAFSA application or when you're completing it, you're going to fill out the schools that you are contemplating going to. And they've expanded the list to up to 20 schools. It doesn't cost you any money. Put any and every school or program that you think you might be applying to. Then what will happen is once schools have accepted you, they have your FAFSA information, and they will determine and come up with a financial aid package for you. Now, immediately upon submitting your FAFSA application, you will find out whether or not you qualify for what's called a federal Pell Grant. And that is money that you don't have to pay back. If you qualify for a full Pell Grant and you are attending school full time, you could get over $7,000 a year, which is amazing. If you qualify for any portion of a Pell Grant, then that is going to qualify you for need-based money. So now the state can come in and they can throw state grants at you, and your school can come in and they can throw a bunch of packages at you. And you could end up with absolutely, not only do you not owe any money, but you're going to get money written back to you because you have such a nice financial aid package. That's amazing. I mean, there is no such thing as having too much money. That's the golden ticket right there. But it all starts with this application. And, there's been story after story. We've seen so many different things with our scholars, not only applying late, but not taking the time to do this application correctly. They make mistakes. They don't realize how just the simplest mistake can affect your aid, your eligibility for any aid, and now you're having to have months of overdoing it. You know, somebody puts an extra zero in their income. Somebody checks the wrong box because you're just not paying attention and you don't understand because, again, as we're discussing, students don't understand anything about financial aid. It's all new to them. But the consequences of having that happen, and also, this is something you have to do every year. And again, I mean, I keep reverting back to the stories of our scholars because we've seen just about everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But, you know, we've had students who just completely forget to apply at all because, you know, when you're in high school and you're living at home and your parents are reminding you or your counselor's reminding you, that makes it easy. Now you're living on your own and nobody is saying, remember, you have to do this. And they forget, and you lose so much aid. We had a student who had a package, I think it was maybe $20,000, lost every bit of it because they didn't do their FAFSA. So again, once it's gone, you know, it's gone. You're now sitting out in a whole nother year. And so there's no excuse. I mean, the homework that you need to do is well worth it if at the end of the day, you're going to be the one that doesn't have to worry about any of this. You know, the stories we have from students who are having to work 1 or 2 jobs to be able to pay for school, and maybe those students are also taking out loans. The added mental stress that this puts on you, you know, you think you're going to be able to handle it, but your college years, that life is so different than your high school. It's just, you can't explain it to anybody. You know, when we talk to high school students, we say, you have no idea what your next year is going to be like. You just can't put yourself into that. And some people have no problem with that transition, and some people really struggle because you have this real life stress on you of, I can't eat this week because I have no money. So I really can't stress enough, you can't get anything without starting with the FAFSA. And, you know, for listeners who are saying, well, I'm not going to qualify for any aid, so I'm not going to do it. That's the wrong attitude. Number one, even if you don't qualify for a federal Pell Grant, if you have to get student loans through their school, they're not going to let you do that unless there's a FAFSA on file. Just in our world, we have partnerships with local schools that will award additional funds, and they won't do it for any student who doesn't have a FAFSA on file. There is no reason not to do it. There's just absolutely no reason. The benefits that come from this are so immeasurable that I know I'm just going over and over and over at this, but there's just no reason to not take the time and take care of it and have it as a calendar item. So, you know, every year at this time, this is one of my responsibilities. I'm going to block out this period of time. I'm going to knock it out. I don't have to worry about it. And, you know, I think that it's important for students to just be educated as to all the different advantages, all the different opportunities, I mean to say, that they have out there, because I don't think they realize that.
Well, again, you've thrown a lot of information at us, a lot of really good information. It sounds like this FAFSA really is the key that unlocks all of the other opportunities. I know we won't give a scholarship unless we have a FAFSA completed from our student applicants. And so, Leslie, if there were a couple of takeaways on your end, what would you like to communicate to our listeners?
Well, I would say 3 short things. I think Austin had really great points, and I would agree with all of those. I would say, if you're listening to this, you need to apply for your FSA ID immediately if you have not. You need to immediately submit your FAFSA application. And I think that what I would stress even more than anything is that this is your life. You're about to leave to go to school. It's not your parents' responsibility anymore. This is your future. I think it's hugely important for you to take the time to learn about all of this. If you don't learn about it, then Each semester when your school has your financial aid package, then you're not looking at it. You're just assuming everything's okay and that the school has your best interests at heart. All of that is false. We educate our students line by line. You need to be looking for this. You need to be watching out for this. Your school's going to make mistakes. Your school is only looking out for themselves and their bottom line. And if you don't care, or if you're looking at it but you don't even know what it means, you could have had something taken away from you or something that's really, going to come and bite you at the end of it, and you're not even aware of it. So I can't stress the need to educate yourself in as many ways as possible.
Well, great. So as Leslie and Austin know, our goal is to help as many students as we can navigate this really very often confusing topic of college financial aid. And so with that in mind, we've created a free downloadable booklet that covers a lot of the topics that we touched on here today and even more, actually. So you can download the 16-page document to learn more about college financial aid and student debit management, and to maximize or minimize, I should say, that debt upon graduation. So the way to do that is go to our website, which is scholarship.org. You can take a look at our website, but if you want to go directly to the copy of the financial aid and debit guide for college students, you go to scholarship.org/FinAid. So that's /FINAID. And you'll see a link to download a PDF of this guide. And I think you'll find it very helpful and informative. It's going to give you some even more information than we were able to provide in our short time together with you today. Leslie and Austin, I really appreciate you helping our listeners better understand college financial aid and your years of experience and your real world examples of how important this topic is has been really helpful to our listeners. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to College Compass by experts at scholarship.org. In our next episode, we're going to continue with part 2 of our Financial Aid 101, Minimizing College or Student Debt series, I should say. And we're going to focus on how to choose the right college or university or institution for your educational goals and your financial situation. In the meantime, you can learn more about us by visiting scholarship.org. And don't forget to follow us on social media for more tips and updates. You can find us on Instagram and LinkedIn. It's at George Snow Scholarship Fund. And on Facebook, TikTok, and X at Snow Scholarship. We really look forward to giving you more information and helping you navigate this very complex and sometimes daunting topic. So thank you guys for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.